In the vast, unforgiving theater of the Pacific War, where empires clashed and the fate of nations hung in the balance, few warships embodied the dramatic rise and catastrophic fall of Japanese naval power, quite like the aircraft carrier Hiryū. Her name, meaning flying dragon, evoked an image of mythical power and swift deadly grace. For a time, she lived up to that name, a spearhead of the Emperor's Kido Butai, the formidable carrier strike force that swept across the oceans in the early days of World War II. But Hiryū's story is ultimately one of defiance in the face of doom. A tragic saga that culminated in the fiery crucible of the Battle of Midway. A battle where she would make a ferocious, unforgettable last stand. This is the story of the Hiryū, the dragon that dared to challenge an overwhelming tide, and the men who sailed her into legend. The 1930s were a period of simmering tensions and escalating naval ambition. Japan, feeling constrained by international naval treaties like the Washington and London naval treaties, sought to build a fleet capable of projecting its power across the Pacific. Aircraft carriers, relatively new but incredibly potent weapons platforms, were central to this vision. The Hiryu was conceived in this era of innovation and strategic maneuvering. Laid down in 1936 and commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy in July 1939, she was a product of Japanese ingenuity, designed to overcome treaty limitations through superior technology and training. Nominally a modified Soryu-class carrier, Hiryu possessed several unique characteristics that set her apart. She displaced around 17,600 tons standard, stretching over 746 feet, approximately 227 meters in length. Her powerful turbines could propel her through the water at an impressive top speed of over 34 knots, roughly 39 miles per hour, 63 kilometers per hour, making her one of the fastest aircraft carriers in the world at the time. This speed was crucial for the offensive doctrine the Japanese Navy was developing. One of Hiryu's most debated design features was her island superstructure. Unlike most carriers, including her near sister Soryu, which had its island on the starboard side, Hiryu's island was placed on the port side. This was an experimental attempt to improve flight deck operations by allowing carriers to operate in pairs, with one port island and one starboard island ship, theoretically optimizing wind patterns over their respective decks. However, the design proved problematic. It tended to create more air turbulence over the landing path and crowded the flight deck on the port side. While a distinctive feature, it was not repeated in subsequent Japanese carrier designs, an implicit acknowledgement of its drawbacks. Hiryu was designed to carry a potent air group, typically around 64 aircraft, though this could vary. Her aerial arsenal consisted of the deadly trio of Japanese naval aviation: the agile Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter, the precise Aichi D3A Val dive bomber, and the lethal Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bomber. These aircraft, flown by some of the best-trained aviators in the world, were the teeth of the Flying Dragon. Upon commissioning, Hiryu, along with Soryu, formed Carrier Division II, a vital component of Japan's burgeoning carrier strength. The crews drilled relentlessly, honing their skills for the conflict they knew was coming. The carrier herself was a city at sea, a complex ecosystem of sailors, pilots, mechanics, and officers, all dedicated to making the Steel Dragon an effective weapon of war. As Japan prepared to unleash its storm across Asia and the Pacific, Hiryu and Carrier Division II were integrated into the Kido Butai, the main carrier striking force of the Imperial Japanese Navy, under the command of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. This force, comprising 6 fleet carriers, was the linchpin of Japan's offensive strategy. Their first major assignment was one of the most audacious and infamous operations in naval history: the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the morning of December 7, 1941, aircraft from Hiryu joined the waves of planes launched from the Kido Butai that descended upon the unsuspecting American naval base in Hawaii. Hiryu's Kates and Vals specifically targeted Ford Island and ships moored on the northwest side of Battleship Row, including the USS Arizona, USS Tennessee, and USS Maryland. Her Zeros strafed Hickam Field and Wheeler Field, contributing to the devastation of American air power on Oahu. The attack was a stunning tactical success for Japan, crippling the U.S. Pacific Fleet's battleship arm and plunging the United States into World War II. Hiryū had drawn first blood, her dragons soaring high in victory. Following Pearl Harbor, Hiryū and her comrades in Carrier Division II continued their relentless offensive. Later in December 1941, they provided crucial air support during the second, and ultimately successful, assault on Wake Island, a tiny American outpost that had stubbornly resisted an earlier invasion attempt. The dragon's fury was felt once more. Then, in early 1942, Hiryū participated in the swift and brutal conquest of the Dutch East Indies. Her aircraft struck targets across the archipelago, playing a key role in neutralizing Allied air and sea power. Notably, in February 1942, aircraft from Hiryū, alongside those from Soryu, Kaga, and Akagi, delivered a devastating blow to Darwin, Australia. This was the largest single attack ever mounted by a foreign power against Australia, causing significant damage and widespread panic. It was another demonstration of the Kido Butai's seemingly unstoppable reach. Perhaps the zenith of Hiryū's early war successes came in April 1942, during the daring Indian Ocean raid. The Kido Butai, with Hiryū prominent among its ranks, swept into the Bay of Bengal and across the Indian Ocean, hunting down British naval forces. On April 9th, aircraft from Hiryū and other carriers located and attacked the British light aircraft carrier HMS Hermes. In a swift and brutal assault, Val dive bombers, including those from Hiryū, rained destruction upon the Hermes, sending her to the bottom within minutes. It was a chilling display of Japanese carrier aviation's proficiency and the vulnerability of even well-defended warships to concentrated air attack. Several other British warships were also sunk during this raid. For the crew of Hiryū, these were months of unbroken victory. The Flying Dragon seemed invincible, her aircrews the masters of the skies and seas. But the relentless pace of operations was taking a toll, and the shadow of a future reckoning was beginning to gather. That reckoning would come at a small, strategically vital atoll in the Central Pacific, Midway. The Japanese High Command, seeking to draw out and destroy the remaining American carriers and seize Midway as an advance base, devised a complex operation for early June 1942. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, hoped this decisive battle would force the United States to negotiate peace. Hiryū, once again part of Vice Admiral Nagumo's first carrier striking force, alongside Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, sailed towards her destiny. They were the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, confident in their superiority. What they didn't know was that American codebreakers had largely deciphered their plans, and the U.S. Navy, under Admirals Nimitz, Fletcher, and Spruance, was setting a deadly trap with three of its own carriers: USS Enterprise, USS Hornet, and USS Yorktown. On the morning of June 4, 1942, the Japanese carriers, including Hiryu, launched their initial strike of 108 aircraft against Midway Atoll. The attack inflicted damage but failed to neutralize the island's airbase. Meanwhile, American scout planes located Nagumo's force. The initial American carrier aircraft attacks against the Japanese fleet were disjointed and largely ineffective, suffering horrific losses to the superior Japanese Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire. For a time, it seemed Japanese skill would prevail yet again. However, a critical period of indecision and misfortune befell Nagumo's force. Confusion reigned on the hangar decks as aircraft were repeatedly rearmed, first with bombs for a second strike on Midway, then with torpedoes when American ships were reported, then back again. This process left hangar decks crammed with unsecured ordnance, fuel lines, and aircraft, creating an incredibly volatile environment. Then, between approximately 10:20 and 10:25 a.m., the tide of the Pacific War turned in a matter of minutes. Dive bombers from the USS Enterprise and USS Yorktown, arriving simultaneously from different directions, found the Japanese carriers at their most vulnerable. Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu were all hit by multiple bombs. Within moments, these three mighty carriers were transformed into blazing infernos, their flight decks shattered, their hangars erupting in a chain reaction of explosions. Hiryu, however, had a stroke of luck. She was steaming slightly apart from the other three, perhaps under a patch of cloud or simply mist in the chaos. She alone escaped the initial devastating American onslaught. as smoke billowed from her stricken sisters. Hiryu, commanded by Captain Tomeo Kaku, and the flagship of Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, commander of Carrier Division 2, found herself the last operational Japanese fleet carrier in the battle. The fate of the Kido Butai, and perhaps Japan's offensive capability in the Pacific, now rested on her flight deck. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi was a man of fierce determination and aggressive spirit. Faced with an unfolding catastrophe, with 3 of his fleet's carriers burning wrecks, many commanders might have considered withdrawal. Not Yamaguchi. Aboard Hiryu, he made the defiant decision to fight on, to strike back at the American carriers that had inflicted such grievous harm. He famously signaled, "Will counterattack. Hiryu is to lead the attack." The crew of Hiryu, despite the grim news from their sister ships, responded with courage and desperate efficiency. Around 10:50 a.m., a mere half-hour after the other carriers were hit, Hiryu began launching her first counterattack wave. 18 HED-3A Val dive bombers, escorted by 6 Zero fighters. Their target was the American carrier USS Yorktown, which had been identified by a Japanese scout plane. The Vals, pressing home their attacks with skill and bravery against intense anti-aircraft fire and American fighters, managed to score 3 direct bomb hits on the Yorktown. The American carrier was heavily damaged, fires raged, and she came to a halt, listing badly. It was a swift and powerful blow, a testament to the skill of Hiryu's air group. The Dragon had struck back. Aboard Hiryu, there was a brief moment of grim satisfaction, but no respite. Admiral Yamaguchi was determined to finish off the damaged American carrier. The returning Val pilots confirmed their hits, but also reported at least 2 more American carriers nearby. The next attack wave, consisting of 10 Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bombers, also escorted by 6 Zeros, was prepared. This attack was led by Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga, a veteran flight leader. Knowing the dire fuel situation for his own aircraft, Tominaga famously took off in a Kate that had a damaged fuel tank on one side, effectively making it a one-way mission if he couldn't find his target quickly or faced heavy opposition. Around 1:30 p.m., Tominaga's Kates, guided by reports from scout planes, located the Yorktown, which had by then managed to control its fires and was even getting underway again. The Kates pressed their attack with suicidal bravery, flying through a hail of fire. They launched their torpedoes, and 2 struck the Yorktown on her port side. The already battered American carrier was crippled anew, losing all power and developing a severe list. She was now truly out of action. Hiryu's airmen had, against all odds, located and effectively neutralized one of the American carriers. It was an astonishing feat of arms, a moment of defiant glory in an otherwise disastrous day for the Japanese. Hiryu's crew and Admiral Yamaguchi, buoyed by these successes, prepared for a third strike, hoping to locate and attack another American carrier before dusk. Aircraft were being spotted on the flight deck, refueled and rearmed. But Hiryu's luck, which had held through the morning's chaos, was about to run out. American scout planes, launched from the remaining U.S. carriers and from Midway itself, had diligently searched for Nagumo's surviving carrier. Around 2:45 p.m., a scout plane from USS Yorktown, before she was torpedoed, spotted Hiryu. Later, around 4 p.m., a more precise sighting report came from a scout plane launched from USS Enterprise. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The Americans, with USS Enterprise and USS Hornet still fully operational, gathered their strength for a decisive blow. Around 5 p.m., a formidable strike force of 24 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, mostly from Enterprise, but including some homeless Yorktown planes that had landed on Enterprise, descended upon the lone Japanese carrier. The American pilots, sighting Hiryu, pushed over into their dives. Despite evasive maneuvers and anti-aircraft fire from Hiryu and her escorts, the Dauntlesses proved lethally accurate. 4 1,000-pound, approximately 450-kilogram, bombs smashed into Hiryu's forward flight deck in quick succession. The impacts were catastrophic. One bomb hit near the forward elevator, collapsing it into a twisted wreck and igniting aircraft that were being prepared for the next strike. The explosions ripped through the flight deck, and ferocious fires erupted, fed by aviation fuel and munitions. The forward third of Hiryu's flight deck was effectively blown apart or buckled upwards. The ship quickly lost speed, and steering control became difficult. The fires spread with terrifying rapidity, engulfing the hangar deck where more fully fueled and armed aircraft were stored. Secondary explosions rocked the ship as bombs and torpedoes cooked off in the intense heat. Hiryu, the proud flying dragon, was mortally wounded, a raging inferno from bow to amidships. The damage control teams aboard Hiryu fought heroically to save their ship, but the fires were simply too intense and widespread. The forward part of the ship was an inferno, and the heat buckled steel plates and made any approach impossible. The ship was dead in the water, her engines eventually stopping as steam lines ruptured and power failed. By the late evening of June 4th, it was clear that Hiryu was doomed. The order to abandon ship was given in the early hours of June 5th. In a poignant and traditional act of samurai valor, Rear Admiral Toman Yamaguchi and the ship's captain Tomeo Kaku decided to share Hiryu's fate. They addressed the surviving crew, took part in a farewell ceremony, and remained aboard as the ship was evacuated. Their bodies would go down with the vessel they had commanded with such distinction. The destroyers Kazugumo and Makigumo rescued the majority of the survivors, some 39 officers and 350 men, though many more were lost. The Japanese destroyers were then ordered to scuttle the still-burning Hiryu with torpedoes to prevent her from falling into enemy hands. One torpedo from the Makigumo reportedly hit, but the stubborn carrier refused to sink immediately. Hiryu, a blazing funeral pyre, finally slipped beneath the waves around 9 a.m. on June 5, 1942, taking with her the hopes of the Kido Butai and the souls of her last commanders. In a strange postscript, about a month later, some 35 of Hiryu's engineering crew, who had been trapped below decks and presumed lost, were found alive aboard a lifeboat by an American patrol plane and subsequently rescued by the USS Ballard. They were among the very few Japanese prisoners of war taken at Midway. The loss of Hiryu, alongside Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, at the Battle of Midway was a catastrophic blow to the Imperial Japanese Navy. It wasn't just the loss of 4 of their premier fleet carriers. It was the irreplaceable loss of hundreds of veteran aircrews, the skilled pilots and navigators who had spearheaded Japan's early victories. Japan's naval aviation arm never fully recovered from Midway. Hiryu's service life was short, less than 3 years, but incredibly eventful. She participated in some of the most significant naval operations of the early Pacific War, earning a fearsome reputation. Her performance at Midway, though ultimately futile, was a remarkable display of courage, determination, and skill. Under the inspiring leadership of Admiral Yamaguchi, Hiryu's airmen fought with a ferocity that inflicted significant damage on the American forces, even as their own fleet was collapsing around them. The strikes against the USS Yorktown, which ultimately led to Yorktown's loss as well, were a testament to their lethal proficiency. Hiryu is remembered not just as a casualty of a pivotal battle, but as a warship that, even in defeat, embodied the fighting spirit of her crew. She was the dragon that fought to the very end, her fiery demise marking a crucial turning point in World War II, the moment when the tide began to turn against the Empire of Japan in the vast Pacific. The story of the Hiryu is a stark reminder of the brutal realities of naval warfare and the profound impact that individual ships and their crews can have on the course of history. From her commissioning as a symbol of Japan's growing ambitions, to her final, defiant act at Midway, the Flying Dragon carved a short but indelible mark on the annals of World War II. Her legacy is one of initial triumph, then desperate courage against overwhelming odds, and finally, tragic loss. We've journeyed through the dramatic life and death of the Japanese aircraft carrier Hiryu, a warship that truly lived up to her Flying Dragon moniker before meeting her end in the pivotal Battle of Midway. What part of Hiryu's story do you find most compelling, her early victories or her defiant last stand? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy diving deep into these incredible tales of military history and the legendary machines of war, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We've got many more campaigns to explore and stories to uncover. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to also drop us a line in the comments with any military topic, vehicle, or battle you're burning to see covered next. We're always on the lookout for your intel to guide our future operations.